The morning sun filtered through the classroom windows of Oak Ridge Elementary School as Ms. Reynolds welcomed her third-grade students. It was a Monday in October, and the children filed in with their usual mix of sleepy faces and excited chatter about weekend adventures. Miss Reynolds had been teaching for 15 years, and she prided herself on knowing her students well. She could tell when someone was having a bad day just by the way they walked through the door. That's why Lily Morgan caught her attention immediately. Lily was typically one of the first to arrive, always eager to help arrange the day's materials or water the classroom plants. A bright student with a gentle smile, she rarely caused any trouble. But today, Lily lingered near the doorway, her small backpack clutched tightly to her chest instead of hanging on her assigned hook. "Good morning, Lily," Ms. Reynolds called warmly. "Don't forget to hang up your backpack, sweetheart." The 7-year-old nodded but didn't move. Her long brown hair fell forward, hiding much of her face. When the bell rang, signaling the start of class, all the other children took their seats at their desks, all except Lily. "Everyone please open your reading journals," Ms. Reynolds instructed as she wrote the day's prompt on the whiteboard. "Lily, please take your seat, honey." The girl shifted her weight from one foot to the other, but remained standing near the back wall. Ms. Reynolds approached her quietly while the other students began writing. "Are you feeling okay today?" she asked, keeping her voice low. Lily nodded again, but still wouldn't look up. "I can't sit down," she whispered. Ms. Reynolds felt the first stirring of real concern. "Are you hurt somewhere? Do you need to see the nurse?" "No." Lily's response came too quickly, too forcefully. "I just want to stand." Ms. Reynolds nodded slowly. "All right. You can stand for now, but let me know if you change your mind." Throughout morning math and spelling, Lily remained on her feet. She participated in class, raising her hand to answer questions, but her usual enthusiasm was missing. Ms. Reynolds noticed that Lily kept her right arm pressed closely against her body, as if protecting it. During group work, the situation became more concerning. When Tommy Jenkins accidentally bumped into Lily's arm while reaching for a pencil, she let out a small cry of pain that she quickly tried to muffle. "Sorry, Lily," Tommy said, looking confused by her strong reaction. Ms. Reynolds watched as tears welled in Lily's eyes. Something was definitely wrong. When the class lined up for recess, Ms. Reynolds gently pulled Lily aside. "Lily, I can see you're hurting. Please tell me what's wrong." The little girl's lower lip trembled. "I fell," she said softly. "Can I see where you're hurt?" Ms. Reynolds asked, keeping her voice steady and kind. After a long moment, Lily slowly extended her right arm. With trembling fingers, she pushed up her long sleeve. Ms. Reynolds felt all the blood drain from her face. The inside of Lily's small arm was covered with angry red marks, some fresh, some partly healed. They weren't the random scrapes of a fall. They formed a distinct pattern that Ms. Reynolds recognized immediately from her mandatory child protection training. "Oh, Lily," she whispered, fighting to keep her expression calm despite the horror she felt. "Who did this to you, sweetheart?" Lily's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they spilled over and ran down her cheeks. "If I tell, he said you'll hurt my mom too." Ms. Reynolds took a deep breath, her teacher's instincts and training kicking in. With one hand, she discreetly pressed the classroom intercom button to call the office. With the other, she gently held Lily's uninjured hand. "You're safe now," she promised. "We're going to get you help." Ms. Reynolds walked Lily to the principal's office with her hand gently resting on the girl's shoulder. She had asked Mrs. Garcia, the teaching assistant, to watch her class for a few minutes. In the hallway, she kept her face calm, but inside, her heart was racing. Principal Blackwell looked up from his desk when they entered. One look at Ms. Reynolds' face told him this was serious. "Mr. Blackwell, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Ms. Reynolds asked, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "Of course. Lily, would you mind waiting with Mrs. Johnson at the front desk? She has some colored pencils you might like to draw with." After making sure Lily was settled, Ms. Reynolds quietly closed the office door and turned to the principal. "I need to report suspected abuse," she said without preamble. "Lily has burns on her arm. They look deliberate, not accidental. She's been hiding them and refused to sit down all morning." Mr. Blackwell's expression grew grave. "Did she say who did this?" "Not directly, But she mentioned that he who threatened to hurt her mother if she told anyone. I believe we need to call Child Protective Services immediately. While Mr. Blackwell made the call, Ms. Reynolds filled out the mandatory reporting form, documenting what she had observed and when. Her hands shook slightly as she wrote, but her words were clear and precise. The school nurse, Mrs. Bennett, was called to examine Lily's injuries. Ms. Reynolds stayed with Lily, who seemed both frightened and oddly relieved. "Am I in trouble?" Lily asked in a small voice as the nurse gently examined her arm. "No, sweetheart, not at all," Ms. Reynolds assured her. "You didn't do anything wrong. We just want to make sure you're safe and your arm gets better." Mrs. Bennett carefully photographed the injuries for the report. "These are cigarette burns," she said quietly to Ms. Reynolds when Lily was distracted by a book. "Multiple instances, different stages of healing." Ms. Reynolds felt sick to her stomach, but kept her face composed for Lily's sake. Within an hour, a social worker named Ms. Patel arrived from Child Protective Services. She had kind eyes and spoke gently to Lily, explaining that her job was to help children stay safe. "Can you tell me who hurt your arm, Lily?" Ms. Patel asked. Lily looked down at her shoes. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. "It's my mom's boyfriend, Ray," she finally whispered. "He says I'm too noisy when he's trying to watch TV. He puts his cigarettes out on my arm to teach me a lesson." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "He said if I told anyone, you would hurt my mom worse than he hurts me." Ms. Reynolds had to turn away for a moment to compose herself. When she looked back, Lily was staring at her with wide, frightened eyes. "What will happen now?" Lily asked. "I don't want to go home if he's there." Miss Patel explained that Lily would need to see a doctor and that they would be speaking with her mother right away. "Our job is to keep both you and your mom safe," she said. "Will I still come to school tomorrow?" Lily asked, looking at Ms. Reynolds. "We'll figure everything out, one step at a time," Ms. Reynolds promised, but she knew things would be complicated in the days ahead. When it was time for Lily to leave with Ms. Patel for her medical examination, she suddenly threw her arms around Ms. Reynolds' waist. "Thank you for seeing me," she whispered. Ms. Reynolds hugged her gently, careful of her injured arm. "I will always see you, Lily," she said softly. "Always." As she watched Lily walk down the hallway holding Ms. Patel's hand, Ms. Reynolds took a deep breath. The day's events had shaken her, but she knew she had done what needed to be done. Now she had to return to her classroom where 23 other children were waiting, unaware of the storm that had just begun. That evening, Ms. Reynolds couldn't stop thinking about Lily. She sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold beside her as she stared at her phone. She had called the school office 3 times already to check for updates, but there was little information they could share. Child protection cases were confidential, even from the teachers who reported them. The doorbell rang, startling her from her thoughts. It was almost 8 o'clock, too late for casual visitors. When she opened the door, she was surprised to see Ms. Patel, the social worker, standing on her porch. "I'm sorry to come by so late," Ms. Patel said, "but I thought you would want to know about Lily. She asked for you several times today." Ms. Reynolds invited her in. "How is she? Where is she staying tonight?" "She's at Riverdale Children's Center for now. The emergency placement is just temporary while we investigate." Ms. Patel accepted the offer of tea and sat down at the kitchen table. The doctor confirmed at least 12 separate burn marks in various stages of healing. Some are weeks old. Ms. Reynolds pressed her hand to her mouth. And all this time, she never said a word. That's not unusual, unfortunately. Children are remarkably good at hiding their pain, especially when they're threatened. Miss Patel stirred her tea slowly. "We interviewed her mother, Sarah Morgan, this afternoon. She works 2 jobs and leaves Lily with her boyfriend when she's on night shifts." "Did she know what was happening?" Miss Patel's expression grew troubled. "She claims she didn't, but there are signs that she's also being abused. She has bruises she tried to hide during our interview. When we told her about Lily's burns, she broke down completely." "What about the boyfriend?" "Ray, I think Lily called him. Raymond Dexter. He has a record. Domestic violence charges from a previous relationship. He's been living with them for about 4 months." Miss Patel's voice hardened slightly. "The police picked him up this afternoon. He was at the apartment, drunk at 3 in the afternoon, claiming he had no idea how Lily got hurt." Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the windows. Miss Reynolds wrapped her hands around her mug, seeking its warmth. Will Lily be coming back to school soon? That's actually why I wanted to talk to you in person, Ms. Paddle said. Lily is asking for her backpack and books. She's worried about falling behind in her schoolwork. A small smile crossed her face. Even in the middle of all this, she's concerned about missing her spelling test on Friday. Despite everything, Ms. Reynolds felt a surge of pride for her students' resilience. I can gather her things and some extra work for her. Would I be allowed to visit her? That's the other thing. She's asked if you could come see her. It's unusual, but in this case, I think it would be beneficial. You're a safe person in her life right now. The next afternoon, after school, Ms. Reynolds drove to the Riverdale Children's Center with Lily's backpack and a stuffed teddy bear she had bought on the way. The center was a plain brick building, but the inside was painted in cheerful colors with children's artwork decorating the walls. When Lily saw Ms. Reynolds, her face lit up with the first real smile Ms. Reynolds had seen in weeks. The burns on her arm were now properly bandaged, and she was wearing clean pajamas with cartoon characters on them. You came, Lily said, hugging the teddy bear to her chest when Ms. Reynolds gave it to her. Of course I did. I brought your books and some special activities for you to work on. They sat together in the center's small library, going through spelling words and math problems. For a little while, it felt almost normal. Just a teacher and her student working together after school. As Ms. Reynolds was preparing to leave, Lily suddenly asked, "Will my mom be okay?" The question caught Ms. Reynolds off guard. Even after everything, Lily was worried about her mother. The same people who are helping you are also helping your mom, she answered carefully. Everyone wants both of you to be safe. Lily nodded, her small face serious. I miss her, but I don't miss being scared all the time. The following week was difficult for everyone involved in Lily's case. Ms. Reynolds kept Lily's desk just as it was, telling the other children that their classmate was taking some time off because she wasn't feeling well. The simple explanation was enough for most of the children, though a few of Lily's closer friends asked more questions. When is Lily coming back? Asked Emma, who usually sat beside Lily during lunch. I'm not sure yet, Ms. Reynolds answered honestly, but I know she misses all of you. On Wednesday afternoon, Ms. Reynolds received a call from Ms. Patel with news about Lily's situation. The court had granted temporary custody to Lily's grandmother, who lived in a neighboring town about 30 minutes away. Will she be changing schools? Ms. Reynolds asked, feeling a pang at the thought of Lily leaving. That's what I wanted to discuss with you, Miss Pavel replied. Her grandmother, Mrs. Morgan, is willing to drive Lily to Oak Ridge Elementary if you think staying in the same school would be best for her right now. I do, Ms. Reynolds said without hesitation. Stability is so important, especially after everything she's been through. 2 days later, Lily returned to class. Ms. Reynolds had prepared the other children, asking them to welcome Lily back warmly, but not to ask too many questions. When Lily walked through the door holding her grandmother's hand, several of her classmates rushed forward with cards they had made for her. Mrs. Morgan was a tall woman with silver hair and the same warm brown eyes as Lily. She spoke quietly with Ms. Reynolds while Lily settled in. Thank you for what you did, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I didn't know. Sarah didn't tell me what was happening. I would have. She couldn't finish the sentence. You're here now, Ms. Reynolds assured her. That's what matters. Throughout the day, Ms. Reynolds kept a close eye on Lily. The girl was quieter than before, but she participated in class activities and even smiled during music time. When the children went outside for recess, Ms. Reynolds noticed that Lily stayed close to the playground aid instead of joining the games. During lunch, Ms. Reynolds sat beside Lily, who was picking at her sandwich without much interest. How are things at your grandmother's house? She asked gently. Lily looked up. It's nice. She has a cat named Pepper who sleeps on my bed. A small smile appeared. And she doesn't watch TV much. She likes to read books instead. That sounds lovely, Ms. Reynolds said. And how are you feeling about everything? Lily was quiet for a moment, carefully breaking her cookie into tiny pieces. I miss my mom, she finally said. Grandma says I'll get to see her soon, but not at our old apartment. Somewhere called a supervised center. That's right, Ms. Reynolds nodded. It's just a place where you can spend time together safely. Is Ray in jail? Lily asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Ms. Reynolds chose her words carefully. He's with the police right now. They're making sure he can't hurt anyone else. Lily seemed to consider this. My mom called Grandma yesterday. She was crying. She said she was sorry she didn't protect me. Lily looked up at Ms. Reynolds, her eyes full of confusion. But it wasn't her fault. Ray said he would hurt her if she tried to stop him. Ms. Reynolds felt her heart break a little more. Even now, Lily was trying to protect her mother. Sometimes adults make mistakes because they're scared too. She explained gently. Your mom loves you very much, and she's getting help now so she can take better care of you. After school, Ms. Reynolds met with the school counselor, Mr. Chen, to discuss a support plan for Lily. They arranged for Lily to have brief check-in sessions with him 3 times a week. She's showing remarkable resilience, Mr. Chen noted after their first session. But there's a long road ahead. Children don't just bounce back from trauma like this. Ms. Reynolds nodded, watching through the window as Lily walked to her grandmother's car, her backpack bouncing slightly with each step. For today at least, she looked almost like any other third grader heading home after school. It was a small victory, but Ms. Reynolds would take it. 2 weeks passed, and a new routine began to take shape. Every morning, Mrs. Morgan's blue sedan would pull up to the school drop-off lane precisely at 8:15 a.m. Lily would climb out with her lunchbox and carefully organized backpack, always turning to wave goodbye to her grandmother before walking through the school doors. In class, Lily was slowly becoming more like her old self. She raised her hand more often during lessons and had started sitting with Emma and Sophia again at lunch. The bandages on her arm were gone now, replaced by long sleeves that covered the healing marks. Ms. Reynolds noticed that Lily no longer flinched when someone accidentally bumped into her arm. On Thursday afternoon, Ms. Reynolds was grading papers when Principal Blackwell knocked on her classroom door. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "Sarah Morgan is here. She'd like to speak with you." Ms. Reynolds felt a flutter of nervousness. She had not met Lily's mother before, only heard about her through reports and conversations with Ms. Patel. She nodded and followed him to the conference room. Sarah Morgan looked younger than Ms. Reynolds had expected. She was thin, with dark circles under eyes that looked just like Lily's. Her hands trembled slightly as she stood to greet the teacher. "Thank you for seeing me," she said softly. "I wanted to meet you, to thank you in person." Ms. Reynolds sat down across from her. "How are you doing, Ms. Morgan?" "Please, call me Sarah." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, revealing a fading bruise near her temple. I'm getting better. I've been staying at New Beginnings Shelter. They have counselors there and a support group for—" She paused. "For women like me." Principal Blackwell excused himself, leaving the 2 women alone. "I've been so ashamed," Sarah continued after a moment, "that I let this happen to Lily, that I couldn't protect my own child." Tears filled her eyes. "The worst part is that I knew something was wrong." She stopped talking around the apartment. She wouldn't wear short sleeves, even when it was hot. But I was afraid to ask, afraid to know. Ms. Reynolds reached across the table and gently touched Sarah's hand. "You're taking steps now. That's what matters to Lily." Sarah wiped her eyes with a tissue. "My mother told me how you discovered what was happening, that you noticed Lily standing instead of sitting, that you saw her arm and immediately got her help." She looked directly at Ms. Reynolds. "I've been angry at everyone, the police, the social workers, even my own mother, but I can't be angry at you. You saved my daughter when I couldn't." Ms. Reynolds felt her own eyes growing damp. "Lily is an amazing little girl. She was so brave." "She talks about you all the time," Sarah said with a small smile. "Ms. Reynolds this, Ms. Reynolds that. She told me you visit her at my mother's house sometimes to help with her reading." "She's making wonderful progress," Ms. Reynolds confirmed, "especially with her creative writing. She wrote a beautiful story last week about a girl who discovers she has magical healing powers." Sarah's smile grew a little wider. "That sounds like something she would write." Her expression turned serious again. "I have my first supervised visit with her tomorrow. I'm nervous. I don't know what to say to her." "Just be there. Listen to her. That's what she needs most right now." After Sarah left, Ms. Reynolds sat alone in the conference room for several minutes, thinking about their conversation. It was easy to villainize parents in these situations, to wonder how they could let abuse happen. But meeting Sarah had reminded her how complex these situations really were. The woman she had just met wasn't a monster. She was a victim too, someone who had made terrible mistakes but was fighting to fix them. That evening, Miss Reynolds called Mrs. Morgan to check on Lily and to let her know about Sarah's visit to the school. "I think it would be good for Lily to know her mother came to see me," Miss Reynolds suggested. "It might help her understand that her mom is trying to make things better." "I'll tell her," Mrs. Morgan agreed. She's been drawing pictures for her mother all week for their visit tomorrow. Pictures of their future together. She's still hoping they can be a family again someday. With the right support, that might be possible, Ms. Reynolds said, hoping she wasn't giving false hope. One day at a time. The courtroom was smaller than Ms. Reynolds had imagined. She sat on a hard wooden bench, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Today was Raymond Dexter's preliminary hearing, and she had been called to testify about what she had observed that day in her classroom. The judge, a stern-faced woman with silver-rimmed glasses, looked through some papers while the attorneys prepared. Ms. Reynolds glanced across the room where Sarah Morgan sat with her mother. Sarah looked different today. Her hair was neatly styled, and she wore a simple blue blouse that Ms. Reynolds guessed was borrowed from her mother. Their eyes met briefly, and Sarah gave her a small, nervous nod. Raymond Dexter sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit. He looked smaller somehow than Ms. Reynolds had pictured him. It was hard to believe this ordinary-looking man had caused so much pain. When he turned his head, she quickly looked away, not wanting to meet his eyes. "The court calls Ms. Julia Reynolds," the bailiff announced. Ms. Reynolds took a deep breath and walked to the witness stand. After being sworn in, she sat down, acutely aware of every eye in the courtroom watching her. The prosecutor, a young woman named Ms. Winters, approached first. "Ms. Reynolds, please tell the court about the events of October 12th in your classroom." Ms. Reynolds described everything in detail, how Lily had refused to sit, how she had noticed the girl protecting her arm, and what she discovered when Lily finally showed her the injuries. "Based on your training as an educator, what did you believe these marks to be?" Ms. Winters asked. "They appeared to be cigarette burns," Ms. Reynolds answered, her voice steady despite the heaviness in her chest. "They were in different stages of healing, suggesting they happened over time, not all at once." When it was the defense attorney's turn, he questioned her credentials. "You're not a medical professional, correct? You have no formal training in identifying abuse injuries." "I'm not a doctor, but all teachers in our district receive mandatory training on recognizing signs of abuse," Ms. Reynolds replied. "The pattern I saw matched what we've been trained to look for." After her testimony was complete, Ms. Reynolds was allowed to stay for the remainder of the hearing. The medical examiner presented photographs of Lily's injuries that made several people in the courtroom gasp. Sarah Morgan sobbed quietly into a tissue. When Raymond Dexter took the stand, he claimed that Lily must have hurt herself accidentally. "Kids get hurt all the time," he said with a shrug. "I never touched her. Sarah can tell you that." But Sarah's testimony told a different story. With a shaking voice, she described the control and fear that had defined their relationship. "He threatened to kill me if I ever tried to leave," she said. "I was afraid to question anything he did. When Lily started wearing long sleeves even on hot days, I suspected something was wrong, but I was too scared to find out what it was." She looked down at her hands. "I failed my daughter, but he is the one who hurt her." By the end of the day, the judge had heard enough to move forward with a full trial. Raymond was denied bail due to the severity of the charges and his previous record. Outside the courthouse, Ms. Reynolds found herself standing next to Sarah and Mrs. Morgan. "Thank you for speaking the truth in there," Mrs. Morgan said, placing a hand on Ms. Reynolds' arm. "How did Lily do in school today?" Sarah asked. "I hated missing her presentation about butterflies." "She did wonderfully," Ms. Reynolds assured her. "One of the other parents recorded it. I can make sure you get a copy." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. "I'd like that very much." As they parted ways in the parking lot, Ms. Reynolds felt both drained and relieved. The hardest part of the legal process was over for now, though the trial itself was still months away. More importantly, Raymond Dexter was behind bars where he couldn't hurt Lily or anyone else. That evening, Ms. Reynolds called Ms. Patel for an update on Lily's case. "The hearing went well from our perspective," Ms. Patel confirmed. "And I have some good news. We're moving forward with a family reunification plan for Sarah and Lily. Really? So soon? Sarah has been making tremendous progress in her program. She's found a part-time job and is looking at apartments near her mother's house. She'll still need to complete parenting classes and continue with therapy, but if all goes well, Lily might be able to live with her again by summer. Ms. Reynolds smiled as she hung up the phone. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time since that terrible Monday morning, she felt truly hopeful about Lily's future. Spring arrived at Oak Ridge Elementary, bringing with it bright sunshine and new beginnings. The classroom windows were decorated with student artwork featuring colorful flowers and butterflies. Ms. Reynolds' third-grade class had just finished their science unit on plant growth, and small paper cups with sprouting bean seeds lined the windowsill. Lily Morgan stood proudly next to her plant, which had grown taller than any of her classmates. "I think mine grew so well because I sang to it every morning," she told Emma, who was measuring her own plant with a ruler. Miss Reynolds smiled as she overheard the conversation. The change in Lily over the past 4 months had been remarkable. Her smile came more easily now, and she had become one of the most active participants in class discussions. The other children had naturally accepted her back into their social circles without asking questions about her absence or the fading marks on her arm. After school that day, Lily waited in the classroom while Ms. Reynolds gathered some books. Today was special. It would be Lily's first overnight visit with her mother in their new apartment. "Are you excited about staying with your mom tonight?" Ms. Reynolds asked as she helped Lily pack her backpack. Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Mom said she made my room really pretty with stars on the ceiling that glow in the dark. And we're going to make pizza together for dinner." "That sounds wonderful," Ms. Reynolds said. "Don't forget to take your weekend homework packet." "I won't." Lily zipped her backpack carefully. Then she looked up at Ms. Reynolds with suddenly serious eyes. "Ms. Reynolds, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Anything." "Are you coming to my mom's celebration next week? She gets her 6-month chip thing at her meeting." Ms. Reynolds had been invited to Sarah's sobriety celebration. After the abuse had been discovered, Sarah had admitted to using alcohol to cope with her own fear and depression, which had clouded her judgment about Ray and the danger he posed. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Ms. Reynolds assured her. "Your mom has worked very hard." Through the classroom window, they could see Sarah's car pulling into the school parking lot. Lily's face lit up. "There she is? Can I go now?" "Go ahead. Tell your mom I said hello." Ms. Reynolds watched from the window as Lily ran to her mother. Sarah looked healthier now. She had gained some weight, and her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. She knelt down to hug Lily tightly before helping her into the car. Before getting in, Sarah looked up at the school building and waved when she spotted Ms. Reynolds in the window. Later that evening, Ms. Reynolds was grading papers at home when her phone rang. It was Ms. Patel. "I wanted to update you on the case," the social worker said. "The court approved the final reunification plan today. If all goes well during these overnight visits, Lily will be able to move back in with Sarah permanently by the end of the month." "That's wonderful news," Ms. Reynolds said. "How is Sarah doing with her recovery?" "Remarkably well. Her counselor says she's one of the most committed clients she's ever worked with. She's maintained her sobriety, completed her parenting classes, and she's now working full-time at that bookstore near the community college." "And what about Ray?" Ms. Reynolds hesitated to ask, but she needed to know. "He took a plea deal last week. He'll serve at least 7 years, with mandatory treatment and a permanent restraining order against both Sarah and Lily." After hanging up, Ms. Reynolds went to her desk and pulled out a card she had been saving. It was a thank you note from Sarah that had arrived the week before, along with a small potted plant. The note was simple but heartfelt. "Because of you, we have a second chance. You saw what I was afraid to see. Thank you for saving both of us." Ms. Reynolds touched the small plant's leaves gently. Like Lily, it was thriving now that it had proper care and attention. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. The phone rang again. This time it was Sarah herself. "I hope it's not too late to call," she said. "I just wanted to tell you that Lily is settled in for the night. She insisted on reading me the story she wrote in your class today before bed." Sarah's voice was full of wonder. "I can't believe how well she's doing after everything." "Children are incredibly resilient when they have the right support," Ms. Reynolds said. And so are their mothers. 1 year had passed since that October morning when Lily stood at the back of Ms. Reynolds' classroom, hiding her secret pain. Today, on a bright September morning, Ms. Reynolds stood in front of a new group of third graders, but her mind was momentarily elsewhere. She had received an email that morning from Sarah Morgan with the subject line, "Our New Beginning," and a photo attachment. The picture showed Lily standing proudly in front of a small house with a red door, holding a sign that read, "Our First Home." Sarah stood beside her, one arm around her daughter's shoulders, both of them smiling widely. After months of saving and working with a program for single mothers, Sarah had finally been able to purchase the small house just 10 minutes from Oak Ridge Elementary. "Ms. Reynolds, are you okay?" A small voice brought her back to the present. One of her new students was looking up at her with concern. "Yes, Zach, I'm just fine," she smiled. "I was thinking about something happy." The classroom door opened, and Principal Blackwell entered with a woman Ms. Reynolds didn't recognize. "Everyone, this is Mrs. Torres from the school district office," he announced. "She's here to observe our school today." The children greeted Mrs. Torres politely before returning to their morning assignments. Principal Blackwell motioned for Ms. Reynolds to join them in the hallway for a moment. "Mrs. Torres is here about the new training program," he explained quietly. "The one based on your experience with Lily Morgan." After what had happened with Lily, Ms. Reynolds had worked with the district to develop more comprehensive training for teachers on recognizing and reporting signs of abuse. What had started as a local initiative had gained attention from neighboring school districts. "We've been implementing your training modules in 3 districts now," Mrs. Torres explained. "The response has been overwhelmingly positive. Teachers feel more confident identifying warning signs and knowing exactly what steps to take." Ms. Reynolds nodded, thinking of how many children might be helped because of what she had learned from Lily's case. "In fact," Mrs. Torres continued, "I wanted to let you know that since the program began, we've seen a 34% increase in teacher-initiated reports that led to confirmed cases of abuse. That means dozens of children are now safe because their teachers knew what to look for." After school that day, Ms. Reynolds had a special visitor. Lily, now a 4th grader, knocked on her classroom door with a small gift bag in her hand. "Mom said I could come say hi," she explained. "I have your classroom for art now, but it's not the same as being in your class all day." "I miss having you as my student," Ms. Reynolds admitted. "But I'm so proud of how well you're doing in 4th grade. Mrs. Watson tells me you're one of her best writers." Lily beamed at the praise. "I brought you something." She handed over the gift bag. Mom helped me pick it out. Inside was a silver picture frame. The photo inside showed Lily and her mother at what appeared to be a community picnic. Behind them was a banner that reads "Survivors Celebration, 1 year free." "This was from our support group party last month," Lily explained. "Mom said you should have a copy because you're part of our story too." Ms. Reynolds felt tears welling in her eyes as she hugged her former student. "Thank you, Lily. This means so much to me." Before Lily left, she paused at the door. "Ms. Reynolds, remember how I couldn't sit down that day? I was so scared." "I remember," Ms. Reynolds said softly. "I'm not scared anymore," Lily said with simple certainty. "Mom says that bad things happened, but they don't define who we are. They just show us how strong we can be." After Lily left, Ms. Reynolds placed the new frame on her desk next to her family photos. She thought about all the children who had passed through her classroom over her 15 years of teaching, the thousands of lessons taught, papers graded, and small triumphs celebrated. But perhaps the most important lesson had been the one Lily had taught her, that sometimes the most crucial part of teaching wasn't what you said, but what you noticed. That evening, Ms. Reynolds added the finishing touches to her presentation for the upcoming teacher training session. The title slide read, "When Something Seems Wrong, Trusting Your Instincts to Protect Children." Below it was a quote from Sarah Morgan's thank you note, "Because someone saw, everything changed." As she saved the file, Ms. Reynolds made a silent promise to all the children who would pass through her classroom in the years to come: "I will always see you. Always."